What is the least amount of time you can spend in the gym and still make gains? A lot of fitness content, including most of my own content, doesn't really answer this question. For the most part, fitness creators use what I'd call a maximalist approach to training. This means you train for as long as you need to maximize progress. In other words, if a 1-hour workout would get you 98% of the results and a 2-hour workout would get you 100% of the results, the maximalist would say you should train for 2 hours. But maximalism isn't always the best. In fact, I would say that minimalism is probably better suited for more people, even if it gets less attention. That's because most people see fitness and bodybuilding as merely part of their lives, not their whole lives. There's also a lot of people who just straight up don't enjoy training, at least not yet, and for them, a minimalist approach can provide an easier starting point. My brother is one of these people. He loves golf and outdoor activities, but he doesn't like lifting weights and he doesn't like the gym. Recently, he started having hip pain and noticed that his strength was lacking at work. So I wrote him a very minimalistic program that only takes him 20 minutes once a week. This is the exact program he does. 1 push exercise, 1 pull exercise, and 1 leg exercise once a week. And it's working great. His strength has improved and his hip pain is completely gone. But even if you are more of a maximalist like me, and you're okay with bodybuilding consuming a lot of your lifestyle, there are going to be times when you're going to want to focus on other things. Work, school, kids, travel, and so on. And knowing how to train like a minimalist will be important knowledge for you to have. So let's get started with what the scientific literature has to say about the minimum training required to make progress in strength, health, and muscle mass. For strength, it's actually pretty simple. Just 1 heavy set done 1 to 3 times per week will be enough to induce significant strength gains for most people. To support this, a 2017 meta-analysis analyzed 9 studies and found that 81% of strength gains were made from simply doing 1 to 4 sets per exercise per week. So if you wanted to increase your squat max as time efficiently as possible, you could do something like this, where you squat 2 days per week, and on each day, you just do 1 heavy working set for 1 to 3 reps. If you have the time, you can optionally add 1 to 2 back-off sets with lighter weights, which research has shown can boost strength a little bit further. It really doesn't take much to see measurable strength gains, because the most important factor for gaining strength is exposure to heavy loads. So for strength, you can get away with doing very little total lifting as long as when you do lift, it's reasonably heavy, ideally coming in the 1 to 5 rep zone. This is actually what I'm doing myself at the moment for the power lifts, as I'm focusing more on bodybuilding now. I just squat and deadlift once per week at a high effort and with relatively high loads. For health, even less is required. This 2022 systematic review, which pulled data from 16 studies on mortality, cardiovascular disease, cancer, and diabetes, found that just 30 to 60 minutes of lifting per week was enough for, quote, maximum risk reduction. In other words, you can see maximum health benefits with just a half hour to an hour of lifting per week. It really doesn't take much. However, for muscle gain, it is a bit more complicated. That's because unlike strength and health, there's a much clearer positive relationship between training volume and muscle hypertrophy. Training volume, of course, is simply the amount of work you do, and it's typically estimated as the number of sets per week. So let's say you did 1 set for your quads per week, that would be considered very low volume and wouldn't cost you very much time at all. On the other hand, if you did 30 sets for your quads per week, that would be very high volume and you'd be spending a lot of time in the gym. Now, if you've been following me or anyone else in the science-based fitness community, you've probably heard that around 10 sets per body part per week is a really good target for most people. Most coaches will recommend splitting those 10 sets up across at least 2 workouts per body part. So for example, you could do 5 sets for your quads on Tuesday and 5 sets for your quads on Friday. But regardless, the blanket recommendation is 10 sets per muscle per week, and more advanced trainees may see marginal gains by going up to 20 sets for some body parts. But does this imply that 10 sets per muscle per week is the bare minimum? What if you did 9 sets per week instead of 10? Or what if you did 5 sets? Would you get half the gains of 10 sets? What if you only did 1 set per week? Would you make any gains at all? Well, luckily, we do have the science to answer these questions, and the results may surprise you. This gray bar represents 100% of the gains possible if you did 10 plus sets per week. This is your maximum possible gains. Doing just 1 to 4 sets per muscle per week, just 1 to 4 sets will get you not 10% of the gains, not 20% of the gains, but 64% of maximum gains. Think about that. 1 set per week is nothing. You could pause the video now, go to a set of bicep curls to failure. It'd take you about 30 seconds, and that alone would get you in the range of 64% of your bicep gains for the week. If you do decide to do a little more, let's say 5 to 9 sets per week, that would bring you up to 84% of maximum gains. But it's actually even better than that for the minimalist, because there are a number of strategies we can use to get even more hypertrophic bang for our buck out of the limited sets we do. This can close the gap even further and get us ever closer to optimal while doing less. But before we dig into those, I should point out that the figures I just discussed do have a few limitations. First, the meta-analysis they come from pooled the results of 15 studies, but the majority of those studies were on untrained or, quote, recreationally trained subjects. Only 2 of the studies were done on properly trained lifters. Still, of those 2 studies, the Rhea paper found no difference between 3 sets versus 1 set per session taken to failure, and this Ostrowski paper found no statistically significant difference between 3, 6, or 12 sets per week, again, all taken to failure. Although I should note that there were non-significant trends in favor of the high volume group. Second, these studies are all reporting averages. On average, people will make 64% of maximum gains by doing 1 to 4 sets per week, but that doesn't mean that everyone will make exactly 64% of maximum gains. For some people, that number will be higher. For some people, that number will be lower. I should also make it clear that as you gain more lifting experience, you do tend to require more volume to keep making progress at a similar rate. However, this doesn't mean that you can't still make measurable progress by doing substantially less. In fact, there are highly veteran bodybuilders that not only make do, but thrive on low-volume protocols. Dorian Yates is considered one of the greatest IFBB pro bodybuilders of all time, and this is what his chest training looked like. He'd hit chest once a week with just 1 set to failure per exercise for 6 to 8 reps. For him, that meant a weekly chest volume of, get this, 4 sets per week. And he built a chest like that off 4 sets per week. Now, Dorian Yates obviously had some pharmaceutical enhancement on his side, but there are examples of elite natural minimalists as well. Jeff Alberts is one of the most decorated natural bodybuilders of all time, and this is one of his current pull workouts where he trains back, biceps, and hamstrings. 2 sets of seated leg curls, 2 sets of RDLs, 2 sets of lat pull downs, and 2 sets of cable bicep curls. That's it. He'll do some version of this workout twice per week, so for the most part, he's only doing 4 to 8 sets per muscle per week. Of course, they're all very high exertion and masterfully executed, and you can't argue with his results. There's also people like Martin Birkin, who inspired a generation of minimalists with his famous Fuck Arounditis article, explaining how so many people waste their time in the gym by not tracking workouts, doing too much junk volume, including way too much ab training, and spending more time warming up than he does for his whole workout. It's also worth mentioning that so far I've only been talking about making gains, but sometimes people just want to maintain what they've already built. There's nothing wrong with maintenance phases, and in this case, you can get away with even less. This study from Bickel and colleagues found that subjects were able to maintain their muscle mass for 8 months, even when they dropped their volume all the way down to 1/9 of what they were doing at baseline. It's a lot easier to maintain your gains than it is to build them from scratch. Now, don't get me wrong, I love maximalist training. Right now, I personally don't mind spending 1 to 2 hours in the gym a day, but there are times when I need to use a low-volume minimalist routine, and my point with the video so far is to show that minimalist training is a lot more effective than many people realize, especially if done correctly. Okay, so with all this theory in mind, let's dig into some of the best minimalist training practices. The first minimalist strategy is to push yourself harder than usual. You can't have it both ways. If you're going to do a lower quantity of work, you need to ensure that that work is high quality. This means you need to execute each and every set as close to perfectly as possible. The lower your volume is, the higher your intensity should be to compensate. And that's my most important tip. On a minimalist routine, most sets should be taken all the way to failure, so an RPE of 10, or at least within a rep or so of failure, so an RPE of 9 or so. The second minimalist strategy is to use DROPSETS. In his textbook on the science and development of muscle hypertrophy, Dr. Brad Schoenfeld suggests that DROPSETS can be used to increase training volume without substantially increasing session duration to make workouts more efficient. Now, a drop set is when you extend a set beyond failure by dropping the weight back and performing more reps after your usual stopping point. This allows you to get more high-tension reps without killing time by resting. Reps are high tension because the muscle's already been to failure once. Generally speaking, after I hit failure once, I'll drop the weight back by 25 to 50% for my drop set, and then I'll take that weight to failure again without resting in between. The third minimalist strategy is to use so-called sensible supersets. Now, a superset is when you do 2 exercises back-to-back without resting in between. It's very common for people to do supersets for the same body part, so like supersetting a bench press with dumbbell flies, but research tells us this is a mistake. This 2020 study found that training performance was decreased when supersets were performed on exercises that trained the same muscles. However, when supersets are performed on exercises that don't train the same muscles, both exercises can still be maximized while saving on time. So it would be smarter to superset your bench press with a dumbbell row, for example, since your pecs will be resting while your back is working, and your back will be resting while your pecs are working. It's also fine for sensible supersets to be somewhat random. For example, you could superset leg press with lateral raises on a full body day because the muscles involved on the two exercises don't overlap. Now, if you were to break down how you actually spend your time in the gym, you'd find that most of your time is not actually spent training, but resting in between sets. Out of curiosity, I did this myself and tracked a random push day where I recorded the exact amount of time I spent lifting versus the amount of time I spent resting, and this is how it broke down. The entire workout took me 1 hour and 10 minutes, so 70 minutes total. Of that 70 minutes, I only spent 14 minutes actually lifting, and I spent 56 minutes resting. That included water breaks, socializing with gym noobs, and taking photos with fans. So only about 20% of my workout was lifting and 80% was resting. Now, I may rest a little bit longer than some, but I can guarantee that most people will find that at least half their time in the gym is spent resting in between sets. This tells us that if we want to make our workouts faster, an obvious solution would be to use shorter rest periods. But there's a problem with this. Research shows that shorter rest periods tend to be worse for hypertrophy because you can't fully recover in between sets. So resting 1 to 4 minutes between sets is the typical science-based recommendation. However, there is evidence showing that if you gradually reduce your rest periods over time, you can still maximize hypertrophy because your cardiovascular endurance will improve, allowing you to recover faster in between sets. In other words, you can start by resting, say, 2 minutes between sets in week 1, then rest for 15 seconds less in week 2, 15 seconds less again in week 3, until eventually you get down to just 1 minute rest in between sets. Lastly, the minimalist should try to cut down on their warm-up time. Whenever I'm in a time crunch, I'll just do 3 to 5 minutes on the treadmill, a few quick dynamic stretches, and hop right into it. After a quick general warm-up, the minimalist can choose exercises that don't require as many warm-up sets. For example, if I do barbell back squats, I'll generally need 4 or 5 warm-up sets to even get to my working weight, and then I'll usually do 2 to 4 more working sets from there. That takes a lot of time. But if I do a machine hack squat, I'll only need 2 warm-up sets before I start the real working sets. So by prioritizing machine exercises that require less warm-up, you can cut down on your total training time as well. Now, before we wrap it up, I wanted to quickly announce that I just opened up a new program for pre-sale that's designed to get you in and out of the gym in under 45 minutes. Studies show that one of the most commonly cited barriers to resistance training is lack of time. And so I wanted to create a routine that could have people get in effective and intense workouts as time efficiently as possible. So if this sounds like something you might be interested in, you can visit jeffnippard.com to check it out. The program comes in a 2-day per week, 3-day per week, 4-day per week, and 5-day per week version, depending on just how busy you are. And as a minimalist routine, it's appropriate for all levels of advancement, assuming you're looking to prioritize time efficiency. The pre-order will last for 1 week, and if you pre-order, you'll get all 4 versions of the program, and you'll also save 30% off the regular price. So if you pre-order, you'll have all 4 versions of the Essentials program forever. If you miss the pre-sale, you'll just choose which one of the programs you want based on your schedule. Pre-order lasts until next Sunday, October 23rd, and if you pre-order now, all 4 versions of the program will be delivered to your inbox on October 23rd. If you're watching this after the pre-order's over, I'll leave a discount code in the description box so you can still save some money if you want to pick it up. So that's it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to leave me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys all here in the next one.